Hi, I'm Mal, and this is Miniature Warriors. Welcome back to the channel. Today's game sees us pushing on with our campaign into 1863. Specifically, our players are about to march to Gettysburg. We'll be playing a series of 3 games over the next month or so, all featured around our famous battle 1 July to 3 July. Today's game, Clash on the Chambersburg Pike, is 1 July mid-morning as Heath's division pushes for Gettysburg. I have 7 players, 3 Union, 4 Confederate, contesting the field. Anyway, I hope you enjoy.
Mid-morning July 1st, 1863, reports are received of rebels advancing on the Emmitsburg Road. Buford's cavalry division is ordered to the southwest. As the Union cavalry departs, Major General Baker, the ranking Union officer in the vicinity, orders Hislop's brigade and his own forward. Perot's brigade deploys to the west of the Lutheran Seminary and is ordered to be ready to march to support the other 2 Federal brigades. As the Union brigades marched northwest along the Chambersburg Pike, the rebel brigades of Heath's division were marching in the opposite direction, making all speed for Gettysburg. Unknown to the Yankees was a second column of Confederate troops maneuvering off to the north. These consisted of a cavalry brigade under Brigadier Brinkwater and a small infantry brigade under Brigadier Kim. The black rectangle marks our tabletop battlefield. Here, as we come upon the field, we are looking northwest from the Lutheran Seminary. We see Perot's brigade deploying to the north of the Chambersburg Pike. Further northwest, we see Baker's other 2 brigades deploying between Hare Ridge and Pitzer's Run. The lead regiments of Colonel Schieffer's command can be seen at the far end of the field. The rebel 1st Texas Cavalry led the advance with the Baton Rouge and Galveston light batteries close behind. His infantry, in march column, brought up the brigade's rear. As the main rebel force advanced down the Chambersburg Pike, dust was noticed to the north, and Brigadier Perot, fearing that Hislop's line might get flanked, abandoned his maneuvering troops in the rear near the Lutheran Seminary, and raced forward to warn the extreme right Yankee regiment of their dangerous position. Hislop and Baker both proceeded to reorientate several regiments to face this possible threat. And this was not a moment too soon, as out of the timber just to the north, Brigadier Kim's brigade of 3 rebel infantry crashed forward and commenced exchanging volleys with the Federals. With the northern end of the Federal line bent back in a hook and the rebel attack developing against the Union right, the Federal batteries on Hare Ridge commenced carronading the lead regiments of Schieffer's brigade. The 1st Texas Cavalry turned southward off the Chambersburg Pike, using a small wood bordering Pitzer's Run to protect their flank from the Yankee gunners. The Federal batteries, finding the cavalry obscured, switched targets to the rebel infantry on the turnpike. Their shells, finding their mark amongst the lead regiments of rebel infantry, who in march column, started to take heavy casualties amongst their ranks. Schieffer at this point, ordered his batteries to move off the road to the Confederate commander's left, in an attempt to support Brigadier Kim's flanking attack that was developing on the far bank of Pitzer's Run. Brigadiers Baker and Hislop committed more troops to stem the Confederate turning maneuver. The firefight between the Yankees and rebels drawing more and more Federal troops into the contest. On the far side of Pitzer's Run, Schieffer's Confederate infantry deployed into the fields north of the Chambersburg Pike, prepping for an assault on the Yankees on Hare Ridge. With Schieffer's brigade massing to the north of the road, Brigadier Heath's regiments turn off the pike to the right and extend the rebel battle line to the south, forming up behind a dismounted cavalry screen provided by the gallant rebel troopers of the 5th Texas Cavalry Battalion. As the battle was developing, fears were still held of further rebels off to the north of the field. To counter this, Perot's brigade was still held in reserve. Just before midday, Hislop's flanking regiments managed to repel the rebel infantry attacking from the north, who withdrew. But the Yankees could still discern movements off to their north and refused to weaken their flank guard. A lull now settled over the field, as the rebels continued to deploy for what could only be their main effort to dislodge the Yankees from Hare Ridge on the far side of Pitzer's Run. It was during this period that several dispatches arrived from General Robert E. Lee, urging Brigadier Heath to push forward and drive those people from the field. With the rebels finishing their deployment, Brigadier Brinkwater's Confederate Cavalry Brigade appeared from the woods to the north of the Federal right flank, supported by Kim's returning infantry. Volleys of musketry smashed into the rebel cavalry who held their ground valiantly. Just as this clash erupted, the deployed rebel battle line swept forward, clambering across the Pitzer's Run and headlong into a maelstrom of Federal shot and shell. On the far right, Brinkwater's rebel cavalry were charged by Federal infantry, who in a hotly contested melee, drove the Rebs backwards. But in sterling Southern Cavalier style, Brinkwater led his cavalry once again back into the fight, but was once again thrown backwards. As Brinkwater's cavalry withdrew for the second time, Brigadier Kim's brigade swept forward, tearing into the ranks of a hard-pressed Yankee regiment that had taken artillery fire to its exposed flank. Being swept from the field, this unmasked the Federal regiments behind, that poured on fire into the worn-out ranks of Kim's units. Brigadier Kim's brigade, now wheeled to their left and in a murderous 15-minute period, exchanged musket volleys with the enemy, at near point-blank range. The larger and fresher Federal infantry regiments gained the advantage, and the remnants of Brigadier Kim's brigade broke and withdrew to the rear. As this firefight was occurring, Sheaff's regiments launched their long-awaited close assault, with the 1st Florida spearheading the attack. The brave rebels crashed into the 2nd New Hampshire Volunteer Battery, and after several intense minutes forced the Yankee gunners to withdraw further up their ridge. But then in turn, were forced back upon the rest of their brigade, falling back, bloodied and battered. Their brigadier rallied his troops and after a short pause sent them forward again to drive the enemy from their positions on the ridge. As Sheaff's lads charged forward, Heath's regiments were feeling out the Union left. Backer's artillery slicing great holes through the Confederate ranks as they came on. With casualties quickly mounting amongst his lead regiments, Heath's regiments seemed to pause. The battle would be determined in the center, on the Chambersburg Pike. With a deafening rebel yell, the Confederate center charged. In a desperate close-fought 10-minute window, the rebels were thrown back. With Brigadier Kim's brigade broken, and Colonel Sheaff's brigade repulsed, General Heath called a halt to the assault and waited for further reinforcements. Brigadier Heath would seek his revenge tomorrow. Major General Backer's small division had held the Hare Ridge against Heath's right hook. The division was reinforced post-battle by the 1st New Hampshire Volunteers and the 14th Maine. Major General Backer was not promoted. Brigadier Hislop's brigade had held the Federal right flank, and had been heavily engaged against both Sheaff's brigade frontally and the rebel flank march. The 3rd Pennsylvania had routed from the field and as such taken the brunt of the casualties. Post-battle, General Meade has reinforced the brigade with the 101st and 102nd New York Infantry Regiments. Brigadier Perrot's brigade had spent most of the day's engagement in the rear and had suffered very few casualties. Army headquarters, though, has seen fit to reinforce Perrot's command with an additional infantry regiment, the 24th Indiana. Brigadier Heath's brigade was hotly engaged on the right as it had crossed the Pitzer's Run. The 40th Virginia had taken crippling casualties and the remnants post-battle had been dispersed. Brigadier Heath's command was reinforced by the 13th North Carolina. Heath was not promoted post-battle. Brigadier Brinkwater's brigade had been split for the battle with Brigadier Kim commanding his infantry. The infantry had performed well, taking sustained losses as they drove into the Yankee flank, but ultimately the casualties saw the brigade's morale break and the troops routed to the rear. General Lee has reinforced the command with the remainder of Cobb's Georgia Legion, being the 2nd and 3rd Georgia Infantry. Neither Brinkwater or Kim were promoted. Colonel Sheaff's brigade had assaulted the Union line directly along the Chambersburg Pike. His cavalry, who had provided a skirmish line to the front of the brigade, had taken particularly heavy losses. The brigade has been reinforced by the 5th Texas and 3rd Florida Infantry Regiments. Colonel Sheaff was not promoted.
Great game, a very entertaining game that saw a Union victory, Confederate defeat on the Chambersburg Pike. There just was not enough troops in Heath's formations to drive the Yankees from her ridge. So, Union victory. Interesting change in gameplay. Players are now, or at least appear to be, very keen on gaining epic points and enhancing their chances of winning the actual campaign. But anyway, very enjoyable. I hope you come back for our next battle, which will see us playing as Day 2, July the 2nd, 1863. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Cheers.